Welcome to episode 3 in this series. I'm talking with Máirtín Óg McDonagh, business and life coach from Mind Over Mountains, based in Oranmore, County Galway. We're chatting about overcoming and learning from life challenges, drawing on both of our experience. So Máirtín, it's great to continue this conversation with you. I'm here with Máirtín Óg McDonagh in his consultation rooms in the Mind Over Mountains consultation rooms in Oranmore. And Máirtín has a wealth of experience. Some of the listeners would have heard your story in the initial series that we did about the life challenges that you've overcome. And we're just here, myself and Máirtín, really chatting about both our experiences, some of the challenges that I've overcome. And we were chatting about Dr. Gladys McGarry that was on in an earlier episode, and Willie Horton was on in the episode 2, and the kind of things that they had to say and the wisdom they had to bring about, overcoming the stuff and rising to the challenges that life throws at us. So I'll just throw open the conversation, Máirtín, to you, kind of looking at, the things we've both talked about. What were the key things for you in some of the challenges that life threw up at you? What were the kind of key things that helped?
Well, it's great to see, Julie, that you jumped straight in at the deep end with me and asked me the difficult questions first. But I think from our conversations together over the last while, I picked up that, you've been through your own challenges, as have I, but I think, yours, specifically the last big challenge you faced was health related, whereas mine was probably business related. But I think we discovered that either or, there was a knock-on effect to your whole life, whereas my personal life got really affected by business issues, and predominantly or mainly the global financial crisis. It affected every part of my life, and I think while your injury was personal, it affected every part of your life as well. And I think what I found interesting in the conversation about us is that sometimes you were talking and I was nodding my head, and I was talking about what I'd put up and you were nodding your head. So I think from that came an understanding that, I wanted to find out what you did that worked for you, and you wanted to find out, like everybody that's listening, what's the golden nuggets. Yes. But I think for me, a lot of what you said was based around your mindset and how you dealt with what you were faced with. And I thought, even though it was a fun element when you brought it up with me, when you said that, I think when you had run a marathon, and I don't know what length of time after that, you had your accident, which resulted in a brain injury, and that. But you said that one of your goals during your the traumatic time of healing and dealing with your injury, and that you bought yourself a pair of runners, and that one of your goals was that you would run a marathon again. Now, to most people who would have known you at the time, Julie, they would have said, that's crazy, she's never going to be able to do that. But I found that very interesting, that you, not only did you buy them, you told me, because I inquired a bit more, I didn't leave it there, and you said, no, I used to wear them every day. And it was a reminder for me that I was going to get better. I was going to work on getting better. And I just thought, from a mindset perspective, it was hugely relative and very interesting. And it tells me a lot about your own character.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the things we've been talking about, because I had, no more than yourself, I had a choice. I had an injury to part of my brain that controlled muscle movement. So muscle movement disorder, and looking at lifelong disability, and I had a choice. And initially, I did see let it cave in on top of me. Initially, I was very much the victim, and that's human. That's where we all go, and that's kind of and I crumbled. And I always remember a very good friend said to me, "You've got 5 minutes more to be the victim." And he took out his stopwatch. And I thought, you're kidding. he's, really kidding. Like, I'm here, I'm seriously injured. Just, you can't do this. He took out the stopwatch, 5 minutes were up, and he walked away. And he left me on my own. And that was the moment where I thought, I've got a choice here. I have choice A, choice B. And that's when I bought the runners. So sometimes, quite often, it's the people you surround yourself with. I don't know if you found that someone pulls you.
100%, yeah. And like in one of my recent podcasts, I got a nice plug in from my podcast there, Julie. I've only recently released.
I know, I'm looking forward to digging into them.
The Mind Over Mountains podcast. But I do talk, and I think one of the first ones where I talk about the influential factors in your life. And in a coaching program I've designed, I do talk about the negative influence and the positive influence. And sometimes, like if you're around negativity and people who are negative, it can have a profound effect on you. Yeah. But somebody like that person that you met at that certain time, it had a hugely positive effect on what you did next. And I'd never underestimate the power of that influential part of somebody that comes into your life at this time, and it has a profound effect on what you do. But in my own case, it's slightly different, Julie, and I think what my wake-up call became really, or hit me in the face really, is when I went to commit suicide on 3 different occasions. But I particularly remember the first and second time where I went down to the sea at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I went to just jump in, and it was a really rough winter's morning. I'll never forget it. I reference it in my book, Mind Over Mountains. But for me, there was something that deep within me, and I spoke to you about this as well. For people listening to this, if you've never been to that place, I hope you never have to go there. But for those of us who have been there, it's a hard one to vocalize and to talk about. But for me, it was something deep within me, very deep, that on those 2 occasions stopped me from doing something that I didn't really want to do. But I felt that I had no other option. But something stopped me from going over the edge. And I felt it within my inner body, deep within me. And from that, it was like, I described it to someone as like something that was flickering within me.
Yeah.
Yes, and I just said, hold on a minute, this is not me.
Yeah.
There's more to me than this. I cannot end it here. There's children, there's grandchildren, there are some people who love me, even though at that particular time in my life, Julie, I couldn't count too many people that I felt loved me.
Yeah.
Because like the global financial crisis had lost my businesses, my marriage of 26 years, my family were blaming me. I had a lot of employees, a lot of years, and they were blaming. I just felt that there was nobody in my corner. Yeah. And that's not an easy place to be. No. And of course, like people listening to this will say, well, people might flippantly say, well, he caused it himself. But nobody really goes out to make mistakes purposely. I was a victim of the global financial crisis. I had had huge success up until then. I was a family man, a father, a brother, husband, all that. A businessman, an entrepreneur, but the dice turned wrong and they went against me, and my fall from grace was monumental. So carrying that was really difficult, but I referenced what was burning inside me, and not once but twice I really felt that got me back to reevaluate where I was and to start a process of trying to pull myself out of where I found myself.
Do you have to sink really low to that edge to come back, to find that flicker in you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a gift, really, I have, and I don't say that lightly. I know from some of my adventures and sporting achievements, like when people listen to this might not know, I cycled across America, 3,000 miles in 25 days for charity a couple of years ago. I've been to some of the highest mountains in the world. And I know that, like, sometimes during that type of a challenge, no more than the challenge I was facing when I lost my businesses, sometimes when you can go to that deep place to find the strength and to find the positivity and to find the mindset that gets you over whatever hurdles you need to get over or face whatever challenges at the time that you're facing. Sometimes these things can be, they feel like to you, they're insurmountable. But deep within you, you find something that propels you forward and that makes you look at whatever challenges you're facing in a different light. And in everyday life now, since I suppose those experiences, particularly what I went through in around the time of the global financial crisis in 09, 08, I've definitely found that there's an inner strength within me that, and I wish I could put it in a bottle and sell it. But what I do with my coaching now and when I'm working with people is I'll try to, because I firmly believe that everybody has it. I think, Julie, you found it within yourself. And I think people who do that inner work, that personal growth and development, that within that is a massive strength. But you need to start that work yourself. You need to find people that create this positivity. You need to have less to do with people who are not helping you in moving that direction.
Factors.
Yes.
Is it a case, as you're talking, it just strikes me, you reach that, I mean, there's no words, that edge, and not just once, Is it a case of looking at the dark? I remember being in a very dark place. Not suicidal, but being in a very dark place. And I suppose before my very best friend said to me 5 minutes more to be the victim, there was some flicker in me as well, as you're talking, that was saying, I need to look at the dark. I need to look at this. I was a marathon runner. My body was in great shape. Everything was great. And suddenly I had a body that didn't work. And that was like just taking the life right out of me. You might as well have taken the plug out. And I felt I was dead. But I do remember sitting on the stairs in my house on my own with my dog. And the dog looking at me looking at the dog, and just going, I've got to face this dark. Mm-hmm. That's what strikes me as you're talking, that is that something that resonates with you, that facing that dark. Just, it's like, there was a kid being afraid of the dark, and then my father saying, you got to look the dark in the face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I referenced earlier, I'm not a person, nor do I know many people who purposely make mistakes. Mm-hmm. But due to circumstances, at times you are facing the reality that, and I find that acknowledgement is huge. In my particular case, I found that initially I went into this cocoon, and I had a client recently who was in the same place. I've come across a lot of my clients actually, not in dissimilar situations, where you can't face the challenges. You feel like the only comfort you can get is in your discomfort. Yeah. And I went into that cocoon of a place where you keep yourself, because it's easier to blame everybody and blame circumstances and blame the whole world rather than trying to find a way out of it. Acknowledging that you're in it is the first part of it, and then facing the reality of, okay, there's so many things here that did not end up the way I wanted them to end up. What have I control over? I have control over my thoughts, and I have control over my actions. Okay, there are a lot of things outside of my reach. I cannot influence an awful lot of stuff, but there are certain things that I can influence. And that's how I started. Mm-hmm. And I started small in the beginning. My physical and mental health became top priority to me. And after that, I started to deal in a small way with what I felt I was able to deal with. Mm-hmm. Because, like, as I referenced recently, like, my life was in a mess. It was like a jigsaw puzzle in a pile on the floor beside me. So what I did was I started to pick out piece by piece that I could have an influence over. My thoughts, my actions, There was so much of the jigsaw puzzle that was outside of my control. And I couldn't, and the enormity of it was holding me back. So what I did was I cocooned myself in the beginning in this place of poor me. Look what the world has done to me. And the bank worked against me, and they took money out of my accounts, and this, that and the other happened, and my wife wasn't happy with me, and now I'm divorced, and I'm this way, and I'm that way, and it was all that. But I wasn't working towards some sort of solutions. And as you said, acknowledging first the darkness, and acknowledging, well, this is where you are, Máirtín. So you're going to have to try and get yourself out of this in some form or fashion. And I did a talk recently for 2 corporate businesses where I spoke about, I said, anybody in the room here consider themselves successful, please put up your hand. But no hand went up, except my own hand. And I said, okay, I'll rephrase it. I said, if we were to look back on your life, I'm asking you in the audience here, look back on your life for the last 10 years to where you are now. If you think you've been successful over the last 10 years, put up your hand. An awful lot of hands went up. Like we do gauge our success forward, Julie, and it's when we buy that car, when we have this amount of money in the bank, when the business is turned over this much money, when the kids are finished in college, whatever it is that the person listening to this is dealing with. But I would encourage you always to look back and say, where am I in the last 10 years? What have I succeeded in doing? In your case, in my case, Julie, it's been colossal. But for everybody listening to us today, they've had achievements. They've had goals that they've set that they've achieved. That's huge success to get to that space. Even in the last year, the last 6 months, I'd encourage you when you're listening to this, have a look back. What has changed? What are you doing differently now? How much have you improved and progressed? Your personal development. But sometimes we put so much emphasis on the going forward. For me, at that time, when I was trying to pull myself out of where, I began to look back and say to myself, Máirtín, you're not a bad person. You've had a lot of success. There was a couple of things that turned against you, but there's an awful lot of other people in the same boat. Okay, let's see what we can change here. Your mental health, your physical health. The 1 or 2 or 3 friends that are still contacting you. God, isn't that lovely? They're willing to catch the phone, ring you and say, how are you? And meet you for a coffee. The simple things in life, Julie, going for a walk. Say, okay, I'm living, I've survived this. I'm going to get better. I'm going to improve. What else can I do? Do I need to work with a coach? Do I need to start doing meditation? What are my golden rules? The things I'm going to do? Who are the people that I feel really positive when I'm around? Who are the people that make me feel negative? What are the situations that are not helping me? And so sometimes you can't avoid them, but definitely you try to reduce their effect on you.
I think, you're talking about gratitude.
Yes.
I remember grabbing a cup of tea and just being grateful for the cup of tea and the heat of the tea in my hands.
Yeah.
And that was my first step towards gratitude.
Yeah, and the smell of a cup of coffee.
The smell of a coffee, going out and have a nice piece of cake, all of those things. So just being grateful for simple things. It's not just, I think they're huge, you wake up in the morning and go, I'm awake, I've got the gift of today, get out of bed, be grateful for where you are, and the friends that you have. That's just as you were talking, because, I've got great friends, but I remember way back, some well-intentioned people, as I was coming away from being a victim and deciding I was going to be a survivor and I was going to recover. And I then had to look at my people I was surrounding myself with, because some very well-intentioned people would say, oh, you poor thing, and let me get a cushion for you and let me do this for you. And they were well-intentioned. But I had to stay away from those people. And I had to, the 1 or 2 that I knew understood, the runners that were on my feet. I always remember going in and buying the runners, and the lady in the running shop looked at me, and she was quite right. She looked at me and she said, and I looked pretty crappy. She was like, those runners are for marathon runners, dear.
Yes.
There's ones over here for walking. And I was like, no, I'm buying those runners. I'm a marathon runner. So, that going with what you're saying, it's just that's what struck me, is you can have friends that are not so much maybe negative, but support you, well-intentioned, in being the victim, saying, oh, poor Máirtín, look at all that's happened, and and you can enter down that road, and it's almost like it's very comfortable. That's the way, really waking up, realising these people are lovely people, but I have to distance myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's an awareness, I think, as well, that's important, Julie, for people to realise that, you realise then that even good-intentioned people, some of their comments and the way they dealt with you was loaded in the wrong way for you. And like for us, as and for anyone listening to this who may be going through difficulties, knowing that is very important, the people that are not helping you as you strive to make these changes. But I think in general for anybody listening to this podcast, that I always ask if I'm doing a public speaking event, I would say, like, to the audience, I'd say, well, how are you in the world, at work, personally, to your friends? How do you show up for other people? Do you pay attention to how another person might be feeling? Do you pay attention to their body language? Do you pay attention to how they show up? And could they need a bit of support? And it's important that you become that person to say to someone, how are you? Would you like a cup of coffee? I thought you were a bit low there the last couple of days. Do you want to talk about it? Even that, for me, that happened to me, where two people took a big interest in the way I was and the way I looked to them. And they were not psychologists or coaches or anything else. They were just good friends. And they met me, and that meant so much to me. And I reference that in the book as well, the fact that they took time to sit down, and there was no agendas. It was just, let's talk to Máirtín. He's going through a tough time, and that realization, like sometimes in these type of podcasts or interactions, people are listening, and it's listening totally for what they can get out of it personally for themselves. But you could have a friend at the moment, or a sibling, or somebody going through something. And it's important that, that you do something about it. Yeah. And that you make that call, and not to be afraid to say, are you okay? Yeah. And that if anything else came out of this podcast today, Julie, as well as what we've spoken about, what we dealt with, I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's the other side of it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, you reminded me of a girl near where I live, up in the Burren, started up a kind of Fit for Life club. I was still very injured and looked pretty crappy, but I knew her, and I went over to her and I was like, do you think I could join? And she said, of course you can. She showed up for me. She knew my story. She knew what I wanted to do. Everybody was running. Their bodies were in great shape. They might do 1 minute walking, 2 minutes running, but there wasn't a problem. Okay. And I was, dragging myself around, walking and crawling around the field or the pitch. But I was up in a football pitch. I was with people that were running. I had this wonderful woman who was the trainer who got it and showed up for me.
Right.
And, she was there with me on that journey as I ended up going eventually to run a marathon. But that's the power of someone showing up for you. She was, she wasn't a life coach or a psychologist either. But that is the other message, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Totally, 100% agree with you. And the other thing I think that's important, Julie, and something I'd like to talk about is how you frame situations and how you frame life and what you're going through and how you look at challenges. Like if you're somebody who, and this is becoming more and more a kind of a trend I find now, is that like people, regardless of what situation or challenge people are facing now, everything's looked at negatively, hugely so. Even this, what we would consider a small challenge, people make mountains out of molehills. And that is developing into a culture with probably our younger people as well, where if you can't Google the answer, you're in all kinds of trouble. But not only that, just, finding a way to college and school or finding your own way of doing things. People are very dependent on others, and then if that's not available, parents in particular, they struggle with it. But I think the learning for me was that regardless of the challenge of what you're facing, there's always another way of looking at it. And even if it is a marriage breakdown, or if it's failure of a business, or if it's just some sort of a challenge you're going through, don't let it put you down completely. Take it in portions and look at it and say, okay, what, if anything, is good in this situation? What's the little nugget? What's the seed of positivity I can take out of it? And if it's something like went totally wrong, like in my case, I couldn't, like that jigsaw puzzle on the floor beside me, it was hard to find a good piece in it, so it was. But I found a few, because I found my own spirit, and I found my own, the things I had done well, my character, my values, what was important to me. I started to pick out things that made me stand up a bit straighter again. And for anybody facing whatever you're facing, slow it down, think. Don't look at it as totally 110% negative. Look at it as, okay, that didn't work out for me. You lose a match, or you're doing a big adventure and it doesn't work out because you get hit by bad weather or something like that. But what are you learning? What have you learned? How far have you progressed from where you were in the last year or 10 years? I rest my case about that. But there's always seeds of positivity in whatever, and particularly in something that doesn't work out, because there's huge learning there. You cannot learn that from a book. You learn it from personal experience. And not everything is that way. There's always a huge part of everybody's life where there's positivity. You're loved by someone someplace. Somebody likes spending time with you. Somebody that you're associated with, and whatever you're doing in your life, they get a buzz from you. So it's important that when something doesn't work out and you're looking at it and you're about to give up on yourself, don't. Just pick something out of it and say, God, I learned a lesson there. And that went well and that went well. Okay, circumstances didn't work out. That didn't go too well. You want to ask me something?
That's what's striking me there is you're talking about is that life's a teacher, and use those circumstances as your teacher.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And you can end up having the biggest wins down the road or not, or whatever, but that's the wisdom that's going to come out of that.
Yeah,
personal growth.
Yeah, it's like the two guys who, like, their father was an alcoholic, and one of them became hugely successful, and the other fella became a raving alcoholic. And they were both asked, well, how come you're hugely successful? And how come you're an alcoholic? The fellow that was an alcoholic said, he said, that's the way my father was, and there was always drink around us, and he was always loaded. And the other fellow said, well, he said, I'm successful because my father was an alcoholic. So, it's how you look at life. Like, my father died at 37, I was 8. I was the eldest of 4. My mother was pregnant with the 5th one of us. I got early lessons in the hardships of life. And I could have gone down the road of poor Máirtín, sure, he'd never turned out to be anything really, sure, his father passed away and they were struggling all their lives and whatever. But my mother was a strong woman. And from, I suppose, the learnings and being around her and that, I saw that the only way you could succeed was strive and work hard and go for it, set your goals and go for it. And that was my beginning. And I was hugely successful, as I referenced earlier. But things went wrong. And not if I could talk all day to someone about cycling the bike across America or climbing a big mountain in the Alps or someplace, or the Himalayas. But life's challenges are different and they hit everybody differently. And I try to be inspirational with people, but I try to be practical as well. Because somebody facing 1/8 or 1/10 of what we faced, Julie, it can be monumental to them. But what I'm trying to get people is to look at your situation differently. Reach out for help, talk to somebody, go to somebody professionally, share the load. I see with business owners now and leaders that they're beginning to look at, I can't be shouldering all this on my own. I need to talk to someone. I found that myself. When I was at the height of my business and I was turning over a lot of millions, I felt I was trying to keep an awful lot of stuff in the air, an awful lot of stuff going, and sometimes in areas where I wasn't strong, but I didn't reach out for help. Even to talk to somebody at a level where it's confidential and the person that you're talking to has some experience, that you're able to say, right, I need a bit of help here. I'm struggling with this. I need to make some changes, whatever the case may be. And the personal lives are the same. I'd like to exercise a bit more. So you try to help people in finding that bit of harmony, I think, more so than balance.
Yeah.
Because sometimes work eats a lot of your time because it has to. Other times you have a bit more time for yourself. So it's finding a bit of harmony, and that's what I found for myself, that works when I'm working with people. They can't be all one way or all the other way. And sometimes it's hard to be 50-50. You can't.
Yeah.
So it's about, dancing to the wind sometimes and seeing, okay, at the moment, the next couple of weeks, we're going to have to get this.
What are the things, which you're talking that keep you grounded? I'm just conscious how, I know myself, I'm beginning to learn now about, I'm doing more meditation. And I'm doing meditation more with a purpose, because I'm beginning to learn that meditation helps to, the neuroscience is saying, and Willie Horton said it in an earlier episode, it helps to rewire our brains. Mm-hmm. And I'm beginning to learn about the thoughts in my head that would be numerous and sometimes exhausting. That my big learning recently was, oh wow, those thoughts are not really me. Mm-hmm. And when I meditate, I'm getting to know me much more. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps me grounded. And I know when I was injured, I did a lot of meditation. I didn't really know why I was doing it, but I know it helped with pain levels. Right. But it did have a huge benefit. So just as you're chatting there, I'm just curious, what's your experience? What keeps you?
Yeah, I listened to Willie's podcast and I found it quite interesting, actually. I dipped, and I do dip into meditation, but I don't know enough about it to be confident to talk about it. It's not my area of expertise. Yeah. But I do find that, particularly if I'm hiking, and if I just sit down on a stone and close my eyes, that to me, and in the beginning I could keep myself silent and kind of, not let everything, not get carried away with all my thoughts about a particular thing. I got better at it. If I did 30 seconds in the beginning, it was nearly a world record for me. But I found I can do it now for a couple of minutes. But I find my exercise and what I do in my adventure, particularly in preparation, when I'm out in the barn or when I'm out on my bike or something, being at one with nature, I just find I can breathe differently, my energy is different and everything else. And I think one of your, it was Gladys, I think, that did your first podcast. Yeah. I think she touched on a few things, but one thing that really came across strongly to me, and I smiled when she was talking about it, was love. And I think that's really important and she references it a lot better than I would, but my understanding and why I smiled when she mentioned it was, I found that at a time where I hated myself, I blamed myself like everybody else. It wasn't really me, but it was the mindset that I've adapted from people that I've been hearing stuff about. I found that the love of my sister's children, who I had moved into my sister's converted garage, and I spent 4.5 years there, but they used to come out to me. They were young at the time, the three of them, but they loved me. And that meant so much to me at a time when I couldn't look in the mirror at myself. Yeah. And I found that self-love became a thing with me again. Like, having lost my father and that, I don't know, I just felt that love wasn't a big part of my life. My mother was so busy. Yeah. There was 5 of us. One was just after being born. And I just found I had to fend for myself for a long time. So now, in the last couple of years, I've found love again, myself. But I found that when I felt I was being blamed for a lot of what went wrong in the world, love wasn't really very high on my agenda. But now I can see the importance of it. And I can see in clients that I'm working with that developing that a bit and getting them to self-love first and appreciate themselves, which you will get from looking at your successes and looking at people that are really close to you. And the love of a good friend. You don't mention that word with a good friend, but it's really important. So I think those 2 areas, but definitely for me, Julie, it's being active, being outside. I don't have to be breaking records or anything, but just getting out into the fresh air and having that space and going out for sunrise walks or dawn or dusk, or just slowing down and listening to nature, the sea, the birds, the trees, whatever. I just love that space.
And that's meditation.
Yeah.
That's meditation. That's kind of the stuff. I'm minding a dog at the moment and going up the fields with the dog. And that's could be gone for an hour.
Yes.
And it's that connection.
Yeah.
And I think what you said there about love, self-love, is really important, that Dr. Gladys mentioned in the first, that's actually, it's something today, in today's world with the internet and Google and all the kind of, beautiful people on Instagram or whatever, I have said it to another person, and they go, oh, is that not selfish? Or is that not, oh, that sounds a bit, do you know, I don't know if I can get into that kind of self-love space, but it's so important. It's so crucial.
It is, and I know, like, it sounds, or it used to more so sound airy-fairy, people make a comment, or he loves himself, or she loves herself.
Yeah.
But I find that to exist as a better person, it starts with you being okay with yourself.
Yeah.
And a stretch from being okay with yourself to me is actually that you love yourself as a person. You love the way you show up for other people.
Yeah.
You love the way you show up for the people who are close to you. Yeah. An extension of that again is you love what you do in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You love your job. You love giving time to other people, but you love actually having time to yourself as well. So love comes into it an awful lot, whether we like it or not. It does. But I think accepting that is important.
Is it harder for men, the whole self-love thing, or am I being sexist?
No, it's a good question. Yeah, there is an abrasiveness and probably
I've mentioned it to a couple of men I know, and they're like, "Oh, go on, get out of here," There is
a toughness about, an assumed toughness about the male persona. But I think really, well, in my own case, I know that when I was doing my coaching qualification, there was 20 of us at the time, and there was one gentleman who was around the same age as myself. We were by far the eldest doing the course, but at the end of it, everybody was asked to write just a couple of lines about anybody who made an impression on them during the course. Well, I got 19 people who said something about me anyway, so I must have made some impression. But this particular man said, when I met Máirtín, I found him a very interesting character. But then he went out, the best way I can describe him as, he said, he has the strength and the durability of granite, where I come from, I suppose, Connemara.
Yeah.
And he said, and the vulnerability of a child. And I just thought, if they wrote that on my gravestone, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
Because that's what I find. I can do the hardest, toughest challenges in the world. I've come back from where I was with what I had to deal with, thankfully. But I am the most humane, kind person you could come across. Yeah. But I find that that's a gift that I have, that I can put myself through whatever I need to put myself through, and I can come out the other side. But my outlook on life has not changed now, in that I face challenges, and from my time of that loss and the fallout that came with it, I'm still struggling. I have a very difficult relationship with my daughter. I don't see my grandchildren, and I'm dealing with that every day, and that's difficult. But predominantly in my life, I live a wholehearted life. I pride myself on helping others. But my own life in particular, I'm married, I'm very happy, I'm in a good place. But I do know for a lot of men that it's a difficult acceptance. It's a different area for them to talk about. I don't have a problem talking about my vulnerability. I think it's one of my strengths. I think it helps a lot of people, be they male or female, that it's okay to be vulnerable in situations, and that it can be a strength if you turn it. Like I said earlier about finding strength in whatever you're dealing with. That can be a huge strength.
And I think that's a really good thing to remember, that it's okay to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And actually, that vulnerability is an open heart, which I'm balancing that off with that other thing side of, getting out in nature, spending that time for yourself, having that grounding with that vulnerability is really, really important. I remember, I suppose, becoming aware of self-love as I was going through medical doctors, both in Ireland and the UK and abroad and further afield to recover. And, you know, to in the medical, when you're injured and you're in the medical area, you're a number. And you can begin to feel very vulnerable. But really, I suppose one of the things that I learned from my experience, my injury, was that connecting with myself and self-love. And the more I dug into self-love, I felt stronger as I was going through the medical hands that I needed to be in at the time. But I just think that self-love and vulnerability are really important for really strikes me.
The holistic living as well, but it's not an easy place for anybody. And I have a lot of success with my clients. At times I work with people and one or two of them don't get across the line.
Yeah.
Because I find with people who reach out first, that's a huge step, because they've decided that they're going to try and make some changes in their lives, or going to try and deal with things that they're not happy with and move in a different way, or start to design a new journey for themselves. Call it whatever you want. But it's standing up and saying, actually, I need to make some changes here. There's a few things, whatever they are, my self-confidence, my job, my career. Personally, I'd like to set some new goals or whatever it is. But that's the start of it. But trying to change sometimes a lifetime of habits, and particularly around your mindset, where this is the way I always did things. This is why I'm no good at that, because somebody said something. And your self-limiting beliefs and your self-doubt. And it can be hard to quieten that side of your life, that voice of negativity that has built up over the years. And then you're trying to make some changes. So some people struggle in the beginning, and then they find great solace and then move forward and they never look back. But other people, sometimes because of influential factors, can be derailed. And that's where I find that real strength comes in personal development and growth. Once you begin to realise that you're not that person, your values have changed, you have a huge amount of experience now, you're older, whatever else, you've had successes, but there's always a couple of things where you struggled. You address them and you move forward. No, I'm not going to give in to them all paradigms and ideas I had. That negativity, I'm moving forward. I need to be positive. I need to love myself a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I need to design what I want to do going forward.
Yeah.
And that's,
designing your life is really what you're kind of...
it is.
And then those, you were talking about, there really is the impact of our thoughts on our lives.
Yeah, it's huge. And I know Willie referenced that. And I find that a lot of self-talk is usually around a mindset that you have built up over a number of years about something. Like when things went wrong for me, I couldn't be the person. Circumstances did it to me. I couldn't be the person I had been for my life up until that time. I wasn't involved in trucks and machinery anymore. I wasn't involved in construction anymore. Those doors were closed. So who was I? And for a while I waddled in that place of, oh God, sure, good poor me, what am I going to do now? But I began to look at, hold on, what's my character here? What are my strengths?
Yeah.
What was I really good at? Who am I as a person? What do I enjoy doing? Yeah. Like I figured out I was a good cook. If you told my ex-wife that I was baking bread and cooking, I'd say she'd throw something at you. But I discovered another talent I had. I discovered, like my mother said to me, she's 88, and she said to me recently, you were a difficult child, she said, you never shut your mouth. I had a pain in my hand, she said, even during the night, she said, rocking the cradle, trying to get you to sleep. And she said, you haven't shut your mouth since. But there was a period in those couple of years where I wasn't really talking to anybody.
Yeah.
But I found that, like, when I decided to go and do a coaching course, I found that actually I could help people from my experiences and my vulnerability and whatever. whatever way I managed to pull myself out of where I was. And I talk about that now, and it's helping people. I found other strengths that, like, I was hugely involved in transport for many, many years. I found out I had an awful lot of knowledge. I worked as a transport consultant for a while. So, like, they're the little seeds that I took out of my jigsaw.
Yeah.
And it's the same for everybody. Like, just because a door or two closes doesn't mean maybe it's just time for them to close. Do you know, like when somebody said to me recently, you couldn't be too effing proud of yourself, all those mistakes you made. I said, no, hold on a minute. I said, I never made mistakes. I made decisions based on where I found myself, the circumstances, and the information I had. And some of those decisions turned out to be the wrong decisions. But I've learned loads. Yeah. I'm a different person today because of those decisions. And that's what happens every one of us. Sometimes they can be fatal. Yeah. In my case, they were pretty serious. Yeah. But I've come through it. And some of those decisions I made, I've developed my strengths from that now. And that's what I'd like everybody to take away from this, that, you know, of course, we all make decisions at times. We're human.
Yeah.
And those decisions don't work out.
Yeah.
I'm sure you look back at your accident 1,000 times and said to yourself, Julie, I wish I did this, or I wish I was 10 minutes later, or I wish whatever. But, like, you can't be defined by that either.
No, it's kind of like, it's that was the past. Mm-hmm. Take those seeds, learn from it, use it as your teacher. Mm-hmm. They were the kind of things I'd like people to take away as well from this conversation. And also the open up meditation. We're going to look at meditation and do meditation in the final episode. The experience of meditation, that it's things like getting on your bike, your mountain bike up the mountains, going for a walk up the mountains, connecting with nature. That's meditation. Mm-hmm. It's not, I used to think, oh, meditation was something monks did of a mountain, you know. But it's not. It's that time for yourself. It's being quiet. It's connecting with nature. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that to me is a great tool to use when you, especially if you're in a bit of a crisis and you're, but, you know, life throws up challenges every day. I know I was working in education and training as a contractor to government bodies. You know, life was great. We earned loads of money. You know, this is really nice. And then, like you can identify with that, suddenly, who am I? What am I? What I identified with was, I identified who I was with what I was doing. And I didn't really know who I was. And that discovery of really who you are, and it could be things I fully took about cooking. I really got into cooking and, you know, stuff. My mother came down for a meal. She was like, first time, oh my God, you can cook. You know.
Yeah, you develop your talents. Like, you know, my English teacher going to school, I did higher course English, but she used to be constantly telling me that, you know, you have so much talent, but your head is in sport and it's elsewhere, and you could be this and you could be that. Now I'm writing books and producing articles, and I have a newsletter on LinkedIn every Thursday, and I have thousands of people signed up to it. Yeah. People like to hear what I talk about. I talk about my experience. I talk about what people are talking to me about. But there is an audience for that type. I never realised I could write a book. I'm 40% through writing my second book at the moment. Yeah. I produced an e-book. So, like, if you said that to me 10 years ago, I was too busy making money with excavators and trucks and whatever else. But I found out that I had different talents. And never close the door on yourself, and never say never. Always check it out, see, maybe I'll try that. If there's something, we all have different passions as well that sometimes go unnoticed and sometimes they die with us. But like somebody said to me recently, well, you definitely are not living the same year 50 times. I'm living 50 years in 1 year, but and that's important, you know, that if you have that enthusiasm for life, it does help an awful lot. My enthusiasm was gone for a while, and I was in that dark place that you mentioned. I wouldn't wish anybody to be there. But thankfully I managed to pull myself out of it and restructure myself and reinvent myself, really. And we all have that power within us. I strongly believe that. I
think that's a great note to finish up. The conversation is a conversation that continues, really. Mm-hmm. But to finish up this for the purpose of the podcast is, you know, that way Máirtín was talking about turning his life around and the new discoveries. I certainly have been similar. I have my MA is in education and training, and I work in a Campbell Julie Clarke candles and Máirtín skincare, and we're manufacturing our own candles, diffusers and skincare. And, you know, it's a whole new world that's opened up to me. I've discovered things that I never knew I was capable of doing. So it's like what you're saying, open up that door, look at this crisis as a teacher. And actually going back to my days in college, one of the things I remember, an old professor said to me that meaning of crisis was a turning point, the Latin for turning point. And that really struck with me through my whole life. And I think that's what we're talking about today.
Yes, 100%. And you may not be at crisis level listening to this, but lessen the load, delegate, reach out for a bit of help, talk to someone or anyone if you're struggling with something. But don't feel like life should be a huge struggle. It shouldn't. Had I suppose, reached out to someone 15, 16 years ago before the global financial crisis, I probably would have survived a lot better. But it was like, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we are inclined to try and shoulder the whole weight. And then you have the added complications of dealing with clients and dealing with employees and staff. And nowadays that has become huge, a huge burden for a lot of business owners, because it takes the entrepreneurialness out of it. And it makes they struggle to deal with a lot of that, because I struggled with it myself and I know what it's like. So I would 100% tell people to reach out, find somebody who can help you in some way, delegate, and don't be carrying the whole load on your own. Do what you're really good at and find help with other stuff.
I think there's a quote from Dr. Gladys in an earlier episode. I don't know if she actually spoke about it in her episode, but certainly in her book, The Well-Lived Life. And it was find the trickle around the dam.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And I just think that if you can remember that, find the trickle around the dam. I think that's what you're talking about. Is reach out.
Yeah.
We can be looking at the burden, but if you look forward and see who's there, who's there to help, who's there. Máirtín, I know you have your own podcast. Maybe you just give us how people can get onto that.
Thanks, Julie, for the opportunity. Yeah, it's Mind Over Mountains podcast. It's available on wherever, Spotify, Apple, all the usual outlets where people get their podcasts. So,
and you've 6 episodes.
We've 6 recorded, and planning another 6 at the moment. The first ones are myself predominantly talking about coaching matters, and I suppose stuff that's coming up for clients and that, and some stuff I've dealt with myself. And the second 6 will probably, I'll mix a little bit of interviews with interesting people and people that might have come through different things, whatever. So I'm enjoying it and looking forward to it. So between writing the second book and producing the podcast and working with clients, my life has definitely taken a huge turn for the better.
A lot of good stuff going on. Máirtín, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. Really, there's some great messages coming out of this.
Yeah, and if people like what they've heard, I'm available I'm on all the social medias. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram as the Mind Over Mountains, but LinkedIn seems to be my main profile at the moment, and they'll find me there under Máirtín Óg McDonagh. So
great.
Sinead?
Well, I really enjoyed my conversation with Máirtín Óg. It's a conversation that will definitely continue. But there's 4 takeaways I have from that conversation. The first is the importance of self-love. It's probably something I hadn't really thought about in years gone by. And certainly Máirtín was saying something similar. The second is surrounding yourself with positive influences and friends who are really going to lift you up and pull you out of that crisis maybe that you're in. The third is look for the trickle around the dam, and that's the quote from Dr. Gladys' book, The Well-Lived Life. And the fourth is start using meditation as a tool to connect with who you really are. And the meditation could be a walk in the mountain, it could be going out on your bike into nature, simply going to watch a sunset. Something very simple. It can be something that lasts 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 minutes, but just to start using meditation as a tool to really connect with who you really are. That's something that I know I'm certainly doing a lot more of. Check out Máirtín Óg's new podcast, Mind Over Mountains, available on all the usual platforms where you get your podcasts, on Apple, Spotify, and so on. And also his website of the same name. He's got lots of wisdom and a life experience, and I certainly really appreciate my conversation with Máirtín, and I come away with a lot from that conversation, and I hope that you do too. Again, this episode was sponsored by Julie Clarke Candles and Máirtín Natural Skincare.